I'd like to call our first panel up to the stage and introduce them while they're coming up. And there is one of our panelists who's virtual, hopefully will appear on the screen. So Jennifer Jones will be on the screen, Julia Anderson, Dawn Edwards, Zulma, Jazmine, and Abimael. Guys coming up? Cassandra? I'm missing people, I think. Dawn, come on up. We begin every ideas meeting after the introduction with a patient panel. We also end with a patient panel, and we do so because of the things that Jonathan said, that we try to keep our patients at the center of all the things that we think are important for innovation. If we are not making products and innovating in ways that our patients will appreciate and understand what we're doing, then we will not have been successful. So it's really important that we focus on our patients. And, Jennifer, can you hear us? Nod. Good. Can you come off mute for a second and say hello? I want to make sure I can hear you.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone.
Perfect. That's great. Cassandra, do we know where? Okay, they haven't come yet? Okay. Well, we're going to have a treat because I was asking our panelists to talk for 5 minutes, and now they're going to get closer to 10 minutes. Well, we may run a little fast. That's fine. What have we asked this first panel to talk about? Jonathan mentioned it's really important that the COVID epidemic has been a tragedy for the dialysis community and for our dialysis patients. And we want to spend a few minutes reflecting on what it meant to our patients and their thoughts about what we can do better in the future. Ideas is all about trying to create a different future for our patients, and it's really important that we hear our patients' voice in creating that future. So I've asked them very specifically to talk, originally for 5 minutes, but talk a little longer, about what their experience was with regard to dialysis during the period since March 2020. So that's 2.5 years when COVID became a pandemic. What would you like to see improved in the future so that the kidney community can meet the challenges of future crises, whether from other diseases, natural disasters, or other actions that happen and cause major disruption in the treatment of kidney disease? And we know those things happen quite a bit. So I'm going to stop with my introduction. I'm going to defer to Jennifer because she's online and let her speak first, if that's okay with you, Jennifer. All right? Okay, so what I want you to do is introduce yourself as what your experience with dialysis, very briefly. Talk about what's happened in the last 2.5 years in terms of the COVID pandemic, and talk about the future and what you'd like to see the kidney community do better. And I'll watch the time, and if you see me waving, can you see me waving at the moment?
Yes.
Then it'll be kind of close to wrapping up. All right, Jennifer, please.
All right. Well, I made my little spiel a little under 5 minutes, so I hopefully I won't go over time now that I have the freedom to do so. However, but thank you, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to share my experience and perspective. I've been navigating these kidney streets since 2011. I was forward deployed to Afghanistan when my kidneys began to fail. I served in the Marine Corps at that time. And I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease called membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis type 1 idiopathic. And fortunately, I received a kidney transplant April 2nd of 2015. But unfortunately, after 5 years, MPGN attacked my transplanted kidney, and I returned to dialysis in January of 2021. Prior to that, I was in the hospital frequently due to the acute kidney damage and my nephrology team trying to do everything possible to save that kidney. So I already was experiencing being inpatient during the pandemic, which was a little nerve-wracking at that time. But upon discovery that I would have to return to dialysis, I was definitely concerned. So I decided that I was going to go into peritoneal dialysis because I believed that that was the best bet for me because I would be able to perform dialysis at home. While inpatient, I was told that I had to choose a dialysis clinic before I could be discharged, since I would have to go in-center to receive treatment until I received the training and my dialysis machine. So I would have preferred to be able to visit the dialysis clinics and see for myself what they had to offer, but because of the situation I was in, I had to rely on the Medicare Dialysis Center comparison website to make that decision for me. And so I chose a 5-star facility that was close to where I resided because I under the assumption that I would receive the best care and access to the latest technology. I was doing my research on what was going on with PD machines, and I saw a lot of talks about the Baxter Omnia, which can be monitored by my dialysis team remotely and can be adjusted on the fly. My treatment can be adjusted through that system instead of having to go in. And I was under the impression that that would be the machine that I received. So I was like, this is great. I won't have to go into the clinic. I won't have to worry about, possibly contracting COVID. It would be excellent. Unfortunately, that's not what I received at this 5-star clinic. I received a home care pro machine, which in my opinion it looked like it was completely outdated. And I had a lot of issues with this machine, and it was drain pain. Oh my gosh, I would wake up in the middle of the night from drain pain, the initial drain pain. It was really bad. So because of that, I would have to go into the clinic very often because it had a little card that I would have to bring in for my team to adjust my treatment. So that defeated the purpose for me because I was still in and out of the clinic very often. And so it became a quite cumbersome experience. So I was experiencing pain every night. I'm having to adjust and readjust my treatment. And I'm trying to control a consistently elevating blood pressure. And then on top of that, I'm still taking tacrolimus because my transplanted kidney still had minimal function. So my nephrology team thought it was best that I would continue taking tacrolimus. But it created a perfect storm. It was actually the day after my birthday. It was August 8th. I ended up in the hospital, and excuse me if I butcher the diagnosis I received. It was posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, also known as PRES. It caused me to have seizures and minimal brain swelling and minimal loss and memory loss. I had to be put into an induced coma for 5 days. And when I woke up, I had no idea where I was and what was going on. And, being in the military, I deployed 3 times to Iraq and 1 time, in the last time was Afghanistan. And I can honestly say that was in the top 3 scariest experiences I've ever had in my entire life. Because of what happened, it was decided that I should return to in-center treatment, which greatly upset me because I didn't feel safe having to sit for hours around others during a pandemic because there really isn't social distancing in the dialysis clinic, which it would be kind of impossible to do so. So I felt like I needed to invest in proper masks and I still had a chest catheter on top of that, so I had tegaderm patches. So I was investing in materials to make me feel safer in this environment that I was trying not to be in the first place. But fortunately, I did receive a second kidney transplant in November of last year, and I did not contract COVID. I still have not contracted COVID, fortunately. I say all this to say that, my takeaway from this experience is that I strongly believe that if I had a machine in which my dialysis team could in real time see what was going on with my treatment, instead that all of this possibly could have been prevented. It is always strange to me to see that some clinics have the latest technology and some clinics don't, especially a clinic that is considered 5 stars due to, because it's considered 5 stars. So I thought, okay, well, it should have the latest technology, right? But I guess there's no regulation for that. So while it is extremely exciting to know that there's a drive to improve dialysis technology and innovation, if it's not accessible to all kidney patients, then it kind of defeats the purpose. I know this might seem a stretch to some, but I strongly believe that it should be mandatory for clinics to upgrade their equipment instead of holding on to outdated technology because it still works. Because that is counterproductive if there is equipment that can benefit a patient, especially during this time, so they won't have to go into the clinic often. And we want to push more patients to have home dialysis. But if the technology isn't accessible to the patient, why would a patient feel a desire to try home hemo if they're ultimately going to end up back in center due to complications, due to the lack of advanced technology in the equipment?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Jennifer. It's quite a story, frankly. It illustrates many things we need to fix in our system. I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dawn Edwards now. Dawn, please tell us your experience and what you'd like to see in the future.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you all for the opportunity to share with you. My name is Dawn Edwards, and I'm from New York, originally from Brooklyn, and currently living in Queens. I'm a 32-year kidney patient. This will be my 32nd year with kidney disease. I was diagnosed at the age of 23 with postpartum glomerulonephritis, and I started dialysis about a year and a half after. I started my journey in the dialysis center, and that was a traumatic experience for me in and of itself. I was fortunate enough 3.5 years later to discover peritoneal dialysis, and I started PD then. And I was, again, fortunate enough to have 10 great years of peritoneal dialysis experience. After that, I was called for a kidney transplant in 2003. I received my transplant, and that lasted until 2010. And that's when I experienced transplant rejection and back into dialysis. Going back to dialysis, that's when I discovered home hemodialysis, and I've been doing home hemodialysis for the past 12 years. I'm currently a nocturnal home hemodialysis patient, and I do treatments literally every other day for 6.5 hours. So as a result of that, they call me an Energizer Bunny because I feel really good, and that's the great treatment for me. And I'm currently trying to get back on the transplant list, so my journey continues. So I'm really, really fortunate to be able to be here and to be able to speak up on behalf of patients 32 years after being diagnosed with kidney disease, because we know that the data shows that half of us only live 5 years after diagnosis. So I take every day as a gift, and I use it as an opportunity to serve and to give back to the community that's given so much to me. So I was really thoughtful about these questions that were asked of me as to my experience during the health emergency. And my first reaction when we heard about COVID and the pandemic, being from New York, we were at the epicenter of everything. So in essence, the whole world pretty much stopped in New York City. And my first reaction was panic. That's when I discovered the community that I lived in. That's when I discovered that things weren't fair on one side of town as they were on the other side of town. That's when I discovered that kidney disease, although it was considered to be a very expensive disease to treat, and there were so many of us, over 750,000 Americans suffer from kidney disease, but we weren't made a priority during this time. And the panic that overcame me was because I discovered that my community lacked resources at that time. On one side of town, you could find fresh food and you could find the groceries that you needed in order to keep yourself healthy and safe. And on my side of town, we had nothing. That's where we experience getting up early in the morning to stand on long lines to wait to get into a supermarket, only to discover there were no fresh produce and no fresh meats there. The panic was because I couldn't find toilet paper for my family. I couldn't find paper towels. And I know everybody was looking for that during that time. But at the times, months later, when everybody else got toilet paper and paper towel, we still didn't have that in my community. We also didn't have the fresh fruits and vegetables that I needed to keep myself healthy. And my family and myself, we resorted to eating grilled cheese and bacon sandwiches for weeks because that's what we could find at the local 99-cent store, because that's where groceries were. The panic was because I worried about my fellow dialysis patients who had to go in-center for treatment. Fortunately for myself, I was a home patient and I had the convenience of dialyzing at home in my own environment, and I was able to keep myself safe. Fortunately for me, my dialysis provider quickly came into action, and they told us nobody come in for clinic treatments. They immediately switched over to telehealth appointments. But my panic was for my fellow dialysis patients who I had gone in-center to visit regularly as a patient advocate, those who had to gird their loins and mask up and go out for dialysis treatments 3 times a week to keep themselves alive, who had to endure transportation where they were exposed to possible infection. And the panic was of the news that I learned regularly of patients who used to be in the dialysis center that we just didn't see anymore. So the panic was just on so many different levels. My second feeling when as we experienced the pandemic was disappointment. I was disappointed at the amount of resources that were available in certain communities. I was disappointed that kidney patients weren't made the priority that I thought that they should be as we waited for vaccine, and they just were not available. And some people were able to get vaccine, but the kidney patients or the kidney community had to wait. And we were some of the most vulnerable people in the population, yet we weren't given the priority to be able to receive vaccine. And disappointment at, again, looking at the numbers of patients that just disappeared from our population. I was disappointed that our leaders and the people that we look up to keep us safe and to create the policies to keep us safe and to provide us with quality of care, had coalitions and collaborations ever since Hurricane Katrina to develop these disaster preparedness plans, and they all fell flat. When it was time for us to put those plans into action, they were just about worthless. We were not ready to take care of the kidney community, in my opinion. And I think that we could have done a much better job. And as a patient, I was disappointed in those that I looked up to create those policies and procedures to keep us safe and healthy during times of emergency. And finally, my last feeling was a feeling of resolve. I made it up in my mind that I was not going to allow this emergency situation to take over my life and to destroy my community of fellow patients. And I, along with the entire kidney community, jumped into action. I hit the ground running, and I was determined that I was going to do everything that I could to help my fellow patients to be able to find the information and the resources that they needed to keep themselves safe and healthy. I got on my computer and I participated in support groups. I participated in webinars and anything that I could possibly do to get my voice heard, to let everyone in the community know what I was experiencing in my neighborhood and my fellow patients, to let everyone know that our needs were unmet. Also to let everyone know how important the patients in the kidney community are at a time like this, that we needed vaccine, that we needed equity in health care, and that the patients in the dialysis center needed education and resources. We had this whole plan to get more patients transplanted and get more patients into home dialysis, yet we were not able to spring into action during the health emergency. And I think there are many lessons that we can learn from this entire situation. Number one is we know that in the dialysis setting where there are so many people in one room treating at one time, we know that we need to get more patients home. Home therapies, we have seen the data. Less patients have contracted the virus, less patients died during the pandemic that were home and transplanted. So we know that there is work to do. There's education that needs to go out to teach our patients that home therapies and transplant are safer options for them. We also need that innovation so that patients feel more comfortable doing a home therapy. Currently, we have these small percentages of patients doing home dialysis, and we have 85% of our patients in this country doing in-center hemodialysis, and we know that these give the worst outcomes. So that's telling us that there is work to be done, number one, in innovation, so that we can have the kind of technology where patients feel safe doing home therapies, where patients can feel that if they get a kidney transplant, that they're going to be able to maintain that transplant, that they know that they'll be able to communicate with their care team in times of emergency. And these forms of treatment need to be equitable. They need to be not just in the good neighborhoods. They need to be available to all dialysis patients. And that's one of my biggest lessons from experiencing the health emergency is that, of course, we have work to do as a kidney community, but this work that we do, it needs to be fairly distributed. It needs to be distributed to patients no matter what their geography is, no matter what their color is, no matter what their race or sexuality is. And we need to make sure that all patients are able to receive the same equitable treatment, the same quality of care, and that we have the innovations that are necessary for patients to feel safe and to get adequate treatment so that we can all experience the same quality of life. So I thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys, can everyone hear me?
Hold it a little bit closer.
A little closer?
Perfect.
All right, there we go. So my name is Julia Aronson, and I am a current dialysis patient and also a patient advocate as well. My story started back in 2004 when I was just a freshman in high school. I was diagnosed with lupus, systemic lupus. So I was always under the impression that I could have an organ that would fail. But I never really thought about it until I developed lupus nephritis in 2017 when I was 27, and my kidneys actually failed on my 30th birthday. I was in the hospital. I was jump-started onto dialysis with a creatinine level of about 9, my nephrologist literally called me and said, "How are you alive right now? You need to start dialysis." And when I started, I started in the hospital. It all happened so quickly for me, and there was really a large lack of education. Before I went to the clinic, I did 4 days in the hospital and then went over to the clinics, and someone patted me on the back once I was connected and said, "Congratulations, you're dialyzing now." And I really had absolutely no idea what was going on, even before I had started dialysis. I will say my nephrologist never really explained to me, I guess, the full extent of what it is or what it was. So it really was a very rude awakening when I started there. But once I was in the clinic, I go to the clinic 3 times a week, and unfortunately I was ineligible for peritoneal dialysis or home hemo. But one thing that I think is very important for dialysis patients is consistency. If you have a fistula, you're getting, a 2 15-gauge needles stabbed into your arm 3 times a week, and it's really important to know that the same person is sticking you or a person that you know is sticking you. It's very, very scary when someone you don't know is coming at you with a needle and you're not really sure about that. The pandemic really messed things up in that way because a lot of the clinics were understaffed, so we had so many people just, running around from clinic to clinic, a different person, cannulating at almost every single time. And because of that, I had some major problems with my fistula. I ended up having a central venous catheter for about 14 months, and I had 5 surgeries on my fistula before it even was working. And it was really difficult to schedule all of those things during COVID. But the other thing that I noticed was with my fellow patients who are around me, I'm very blessed in the fact that I have steady transportation to go to and from dialysis. In where I'm from, which is the Denver metro area, there was only one clinic that you could go to if you had been exposed to COVID or if you had symptoms or anything like that. And it was honestly really terrifying to go there. I only had to go there once, but you were afraid of contracting disease or anything like that, and a lot of people didn't want to go, and a lot of people just could not get transportation. It wasn't accessible to them. And now this clinic that I'm talking about was about an hour and a half away, and patients really suffered because of that. They weren't able to get the type of treatment that they needed. Some of them came in only once a week to get their, hemodialysis, and as Dawn was saying, it was very tragic and very unfortunate to see how many people stopped coming for whatever reason or were passed, and so that was honestly very hard. And again, too, with the patient education, I think that was also something in the clinic that, had I started dialysis in the clinic, it maybe had been a little bit different, but I still didn't really receive, the education that I thought was necessary. Also, during that time, because a lot of things were understaffed, we didn't have many resources that normally we would have had, like the social worker and our dietitian. I can honestly say right now I have not seen either of them in about 6 weeks. So, you need to understand what your levels are. I found out that my phosphorus was completely out of control and should have known that, but I didn't have a meeting with the dietitian or, anything for many, many weeks. So that was something that was a little hard there. But I think in order to, one thing that is a very small thing, but I think is quite important to improve the patient experience, and we still have this in my clinic, and I know it was done away with during COVID, is ice chips. And I know that, as a dialysis patient, we're on fluid restrictions and we shouldn't just be sitting there guzzling ice during treatment, obviously. But it really is a saving grace if you get nauseated. And if you've ever been on dialysis, you know that nausea goes hand in hand. And they really did do away with that. So I have done a decent amount of traveling to other clinics, and I've seen like what they have and resources and things like that. And I usually will bring a thermos with me with ice in there. And I'll tell you, one of the worst things is when you're cramping or you're feeling like you're going to throw up and you need to open up that thermos and, oh, shocker, you have a fistula right there, so you can't open it. And it's like the thing you need isn't there. So one thing I thought maybe that we could do in the clinics is have like one specific person going back and forth who would be able to, maybe a volunteer or someone who'd be able to do that. Because if you come in with a cup of ice at the end of a 3.5-hour treatment or a 4-hour treatment, you're not necessarily going to have ice anymore. It's just going to be water. Another thing that I was thinking about that could be improved, because we did talk very much about, disaster preparedness, and we were not prepared for COVID in the least. We really did not take too many precautions at my clinic, and I can honestly say that I felt very unsafe at certain times. But also, as I said, I was ineligible for home hemo or peritoneal dialysis, and there are many patients like that who unfortunately have to go to the clinics, and I feel like we need to really try and get more people to be educated about home hemo, and if they're able to do it, they should, and really try and get those, the mortality rates down, because it's just been so difficult during this pandemic to, I guess really assimilate to getting to know everything, because we were really running blind for a while. A lot of the physicians and everyone in the medical community didn't really know what was going on, and I think we just really need to come together as a community as a whole and, educate each other about, this thing, the kidney disease, and really say how important it is and how many people it affects, because it affects a lot more people than you would think. So, yeah.
We might run a few minutes over. I apologize for that. I think Abimael's arrived. Abimael, are you here?
Hi, my name is Abimael, and I'm a kidney patient also. Fortunately for me, when I got diagnosed with the kidney disease, it was way after the pandemic, so I don't have stories like my fellow patients over here, but the home dialysis option, it's kind of a little bit scary for me because I don't see myself sticking myself with a 15-gauge needle, and like when you're on a dialysis machine, the alarms go off pretty much often, like 20, 30 times a session, and that by itself, it's kind of a scary situation. And I think to myself, if I have to do that at home, it would be, I don't know, like something like a life-threatening situation, and I don't see myself doing it. And if there's a better option, like my fellow Canadian patient said, new technologies that would prevent that, it would be a pretty cool idea. And aside from that, I think that's
Thank
just
you.
it.
Thanks. I'd like to thank our patient panel, Jennifer as well, being virtual. Appreciate it. The stories are really important. Thank you so much.